Alright, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to lesson 4.2. How do I use the speed formula to find other variables? And so, as a quick review, we're going to look at the formula of speed. Speed, as defined, is basically the ratio that describes the distance over an amount of time that it takes. So, traveling a distance over a period of time. Our formula that we use is distance over time, or d divided by t. And so when calculating speed, I need to know my units and use the units in the problem unless you're directed otherwise. But I'm looking at this and I don't always need to know the speed. I might need to know the distance that was traveled or the time that it took to get there. And so not always am I going to have a clear-cut formula here. And so I'm going to teach you guys in this lesson how to find out the distance or the time when given the other two variables. Algebraically, how can I figure that out? An example problem of this would be this one right here. Austin was jogging in preparation for a marathon. He jogged a speed of 8 miles per hour for 45 minutes in length, and so that's how long it took him. That's about 0.75 hours, or 3/4 of an hour. What was the distance that he jogged during that time? And so this might be a typical problem you might see involving this. I need to know the distance, and I'm given the speed and the time it took to go that speed. So we're trying to figure out the distance in here. There are three things we need to know with every type of problem. What do I know from the problem? So do I know the speed? Do I know the distance? Do I know the time? These are things I need to figure out. What do I need to find out? Same thing. If I know the distance and the time, I need to know the speed. If I know the time and the distance, I need to figure out what I'm missing. Okay? So when you're trying to use the speed formula to figure out distance and time, what you need to do is you need to solve this algebraically. And to do that, you need to isolate the variable. You know this in math class, and that simply means get the variable by itself. And so to do this, I need to use inverse operations. To review what I mean by inverse operations, it just means opposite. So instead of multiply, I divide to get it by itself. Instead of add, I subtract, and vice versa. I have my typical speed formula, distance divided by time, but I want to get distance by itself that I see here. And so I have underneath it, I'm dividing it by time. So whatever I'm dividing by time, I can do the opposite to both sides in order to move the equation. So I'm going to have, since I'm dividing by this, I'm going to multiply by time on both sides. And so I end up with these two canceling out, because that's kind of like this over 1. I cancel them out. And I end up with distance equaling time times speed. This one's a little bit different. I'm going to try to find the time when given the distance and the speed. So this one's I'm trying to find here. And so right now it's divided by that, and I can't just multiply by time at this point, because all that's going to do when I multiply by time on both sides, I get ST equals D. And that doesn't really help me right now, but what it does help me do is it helps me do the next step. If I'm multiplying time, which is this T right here, by S, if I want to get T by itself, I'm going to have to divide this by speed. Okay, so I end up getting that, so S times, or divided by S, they cancel out, and so I'm ending up with time equaling distance divided by speed. So what we're left with when we do all this isolating of the variables of speed, time, and distance, we're left with these three formulas. You can copy these in your notes for yourself. So our first example is that Austin was jogging in preparation for a marathon. He jogged at a speed of 8 miles per hour for 45 minutes, which is about 0.75 hours. What was the distance that he jogged? And so what we have here is we need to first identify what we have and then what we don't, and that will figure out what we need to find. And so we have 8 miles per hour, so we're going to put that right here. And we have 45 minutes, which in hours, because we are in hours for that, would be 0.75 hours. And I'm trying to find the distance. And so what I need to do is I have my formula. So speed equals distance divided by time. Okay? And so if I'm trying to get d by itself, I need to use inverse operations to get d by itself. So I'm going to do that to t. So since I'm dividing t, I'm going to multiply to get inverse operations. Okay? And so what that does is that gives me, it cancels out these, and I'm left with time times speed equals distance. So now distance is by itself. Now I can start putting in the information. So my time is 0.75 hours times my speed of 8. And that's going to give me my distance traveled. And so I do that and I put it in my calculator, and I should end up with a distance of 6 miles, since I was traveling in miles per hour. And that's going to be my distance. So I'm going to take it, change it, and I'm left with 6 miles. Our next and final example is that Dale is driving a four-wheeler at an average speed of 30 miles per hour. He covered 120 miles during the afternoon. How many hours was Dale riding his four-wheeler? So we have our speed. So I'm looking here and I see a speed of 30 miles per hour. So 30 miles per hour. I also have my distance of 120 miles. What is my time? How long was he outside? And this is going to be in hours because we see miles per hour. So we're going to figure out how many hours it would be. So I put in my formula, speed equals distance divided by time, and I use inverse operations to get d by itself. But the reason why I'm doing that is so that I can eventually get t singled out. So I can't really do divided by d. That's not going to change. That'll change things up. And so what I want to do is I'm going to times it by t, and that's going to give me s times t equals d. And because of properties, order doesn't matter, and so I'm going to divide by speed to get t by itself. So that cancels these out, and I'm left with t equals d divided by s, distance divided by speed. So I just put in my information here, and so my distance was 120 miles divided by a speed of 30 miles per hour. So that gives me a total of 4 hours. So my time is no longer a question mark, but using formulas I'm able to figure out that it is 4 hours. So using the speed formula to find distance and time, the way I do that is, the big thing I need to remember is I need to isolate the variable by using inverse operations and some algebra to figure out what the distance and the time is by itself.